So in the final screencast for this week, I want to move away from participation sport and consider the elite end of the sports market. And in particular, I want to consider determinants of demand for professional team sports. So you might want to pause the presentation here and just try to identify some factors that you think might determine the reasons why people attend professional sports games. We're going to talk through some of these briefly on the next slide, but if you want to engage in this learning activity, you might just want to spend some time pausing the screencast and writing down some of the things that you think determine decisions to attend a professional sports game. So when economists have tried to model using econometric modelling demand for sports games, they've come up with a very long list of factors, and these are some of those factors. So age, sex, socioeconomic status. Just as with participation sports, different ages and different genders have different propensity to actually attend professional sports games, as does socioeconomic class. We've also got the size and distribution of the population within a specified travel time or time zone for the game. So what's the propensity of people within a population the size of X to travel to a game? Ethnicity, the same as age, sex and socioeconomic status. There is an association between ethnicity and likelihood to attend an event. Cost of entry, so price, is another possibility. Location of the ground and transport factors, travel time. Team performance, how good the team's form has been, whether they're playing well or on a losing streak, can determine attendance numbers. The stadium capacity itself, if the stadium has a relatively small capacity, this is going to kind of determine demand. If it's a large capacity, then there is obviously the likelihood of higher attendance. The stadium quality, services and facilities. Previous to the 1980s, British football had seen a long period of decline in attendance. Now, after the Hillsborough disaster, which saw over 90 Liverpool fans crushed to death, and part of the reasons for this were seen to be outdated stadia facility. In the UK, we've had a shift to all-seater stadia and an improvement in services and facilities, and many commentators have seen this as partially behind the increased demand for football, professional football, and increased attendance at football games. There are also substitutes and complements to the match, the availability of those and the price of those. Media coverage, which could be counted as a kind of substitute or a complement, and weather conditions. So climate, we discussed climate and the impact of climate on participation for some people in some climates, among students on the group, when they were discussing kind of, whether time was a constraint. Some people were saying, well, actually, it isn't time, but it's access to facilities because the climate isn't good. Then weather conditions can also have an impact on attendance at many professional sport fixtures, depending on how well the stadium is covered. In the sport of cricket, whether the game is actually going to go ahead or not. And there will be others as well. However, one thing which is determined as being very important, and possibly the most important factor affecting demand, is uncertainty of outcome. Now, uncertainty of outcome refers to how well the teams are matched. And if teams are well matched, then the result of the game is going to be in doubt. And the more the result of the game is in doubt and the less of a foregone conclusion it is, the higher the entertainment value. And remember that decisions in economics that consumers made are determined by utility, and utility is a shorthand for enjoyment. And the rationale is that the uncertainty about who is going to win, the fact that your team may win but might not win also, is a factor which can determine the attractiveness of the game, the fixture. So uncertainty of outcome is seen amongst sport economists, and those sport economists looking at professional sport as being very, very important. So a definition of uncertainty of outcome is a situation where a given contest within a league structure has a degree of unpredictability about the result, and that the competition as a whole does not have a predetermined winner at the outset of the competition. Now, we could look at uncertainty of outcome, and we could say probably for the English Premier League at the start of many seasons, we could name with an 80-90% certainty the top 5 teams. So it depends, how we define uncertainty of outcome. But for many people, the Premier League has got an issue with uncertainty of outcome. And sport has an issue with uncertainty of outcome unless we kind of intervene and try to deal with this. So this is about understanding success from a team point of view and a league point of view. So a 6-5 victory in football is as successful as a 10-0 victory. A 6-5 victory is much more likely to sustain demand because of entertainment value. Yeah. Basically, other things being equal, ceteris paribus in economics is the Latin term for this. The greater the degree of competition, the larger the crowds. And the greater the crowds, the more revenue that is derived from gate receipts and ultimately from broadcasting income as well. So uncertainty of outcome is defined as being, the fact that, one team is going to win, but we can't be certain which team is going to win. And people in football in this country do also, refer to a thrilling 0-0 draw. So there still can be entertainment even if someone doesn't win. So there are 3 types of uncertainty of outcome, and these are at the match level. So going into any fixture, there's probably, a higher degree of uncertainty about match outcome, because on a given day, any team can have a bad day, any team can have a good day, and there is uncertainty of match outcome as a result of that. Uncertainty of seasonal outcome or short-run uncertainty there becomes a little less kind of uncertainty of outcome around this. And this relates to all games within a season, right? So, this refers to who is going to be the top of the league, who's going to have the most points, who's going to have the best win-loss record. Okay. So we've said for the Premier League, it's relatively easy each season to predict those teams that are going to be at the top. There might be a thrilling fight out for actually who does come out on top, but over the season, it is easier to predict who is going to be successful, even if we can't predict who the ultimate winner might be. So that's uncertainty of seasonal outcome or short-run uncertainty. Over the long run, we know that some teams, and in English football, we know that, teams like Manchester United, Arsenal, Liverpool, if we look over the long term, have a record of winning more championships more European championships, more FA Cups, more titles than other people, than other teams. You know, in basketball terms, for example, the NBA, we know that the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers have been the most dominant franchises. And we know that other franchises, so in basketball, I'm a New York Knicks fan, and the New York Knicks have historically been a team which hasn't done well in terms of winning championships for a city the size and with a market the size of a city like New York. Okay. But what is important overall is that for the survival of clubs and a league is that we don't have domination by one team year in, year out. Okay. So, although we have some teams which have dominated to a degree, or some teams which are more likely to have higher levels of long run success, what we don't want is a team to win year after year after year after year. Okay. Because it is seen as being detrimental to uncertainty of outcome, and that people will begin to switch off. So, what's the implications of uncertainty of outcome? Well, one of the main things is there is a tension between teams and leagues. Teams want to win games. Teams want to win competitions. Teams want to win trophies. That's what sport is about at the elite level, at least. You know, the need to win is an essential part of sport. But leagues don't really want this kind of, you know, single team to dominate. So teams and leagues have got to cooperate to ensure there is something called competitive balance, and that competitive balance is maintained, right? And in this sense, sports leagues and professional sport operates in a way which is quite different than other businesses. And we need to examine how and why sports leagues operate as cartels, and how their structures and operations try to maintain equilibrium or competitive balance within the league, right? And a cartel, a definition of a cartel, is an agreement by a number of independent suppliers of a product to coordinate their supply decisions so all of them will earn monopoly benefits, right? And what we're talking about is beyond simple competition between teams, right? Competition between teams, which is uneven, will ultimately destroy the value of a sports league. And some commentators have talked about what's required in professional sport as being co-opetition. So a mix of competition and cooperation at the same time. Okay. So this is part of what's called the peculiar economics of team sports. So unlike many businesses, professional sport teams require the survival of other teams if they themselves are to survive. Unlike other professions, other industries, teams require another team in order for them to be able to produce their product. This is the game, yeah? So for the good of the game, we need this. And the conventional textbook firm in economic theory tries to increase its market power so that ultimately it maximizes its own interest and profit when it achieves maximum power as a monopolist. Now, what I say to students when we look at Porter's 5 forces in international sports strategy, and I'm sure that Mark will have said this to you, so it's to you as well, is that Porter's 5 forces has limitations, because Porter's 5 forces is about trying to come to a situation where you eliminate the threat of new entrants, you eliminate the threat of you eliminate the bargaining power of buyers, you eliminate the bargaining power of suppliers, you eliminate the threat of substitutes, so that you are able to reduce competition to such an extent that it is non-existent, and that you are able to charge high prices and generate very high profits. Okay, now, this doesn't work in professional team sports because we don't want to eliminate the threat of substitutes. We don't want to eliminate the threat of new entrants. We want a degree of competitive balance within the game. Also, for national governing bodies of sports, for participation sports, we don't want to eliminate the threat of new entrants. We don't want to eliminate we don't want to reduce kind of other people in the industry. We don't want to reduce competitive rivalry. We want sport organisations to cooperate together to overall increase demand for sport, to increase participation. What we want in professional team sports is we want strong competitive rivalry. We don't want weak competitive rivalry. As Porter's Five Forces says, we want strong competitive rivalry to make the game overall an attractive proposition. So this is where the nature of sport as an industry is quite different than many other industries, because we don't want organisations to seek monopoly, to force others out of business. In some areas we do. Nike's unofficial mission statement for many years was crush Adidas. So in that area, the pure sport, the pure business area of the sport industry, we might want to see that. But in participation sport, we want to see a diversity of choice through a mixed economy to promote opportunities to participate. In professional team sport, we want to see a degree of competition to make the sport an entertaining proposition without a dominant team to reduce uncertainty of outcome. So this does lead to some extent to a team versus league conflict. So each individual club is concerned about their own success and survival. Yeah. So it wants to win, and it also wants to be successful in order to generate high levels of gate receipts, to be able to generate high levels of merchandise, and to be able to generate high levels of commercial revenue through sponsorship, and corporate hospitality and so on. However, we need to understand the economics of professional team sports, and what has become increasingly important, certainly in English football, is broadcast revenue, and individual teams in the English league do not sell the broadcasting rights to their games. It's the league as a whole. So the teams also have an interest in a competitive league. Yeah. So as teams want to be successful, there is a kind of there is a tension with the competitive balance of the league. So football and professional sport team owners have got to work together with the league to ensure the prosperity of the league, but also to compete with each other to maximise profits. So This does lead to different debates and different issues, which I'm sure Darragh will pick up with you when he takes over the module and talks about this in different ways. But we have kind of different systems and different approaches in different sports. So the North American sport has got the kind of college draft system and a player and a trading model and a salary cap, which is absent in the European sport model, which is dependent not on a college draft system, which favours kind of teams with a lower win-loss record than teams which succeed. And that is aimed to try and maintain competitive balance within North American leagues. In Europe, we have a more open system with kind of relegation and promotion, but we also have an open market for player transfers where the highest bidder usually wins and the richest teams usually win as well. So Darryl will talk to you more about this, but uncertainty of outcome is an issue which is important and relevant for professional team sports. But in talking about uncertainty of outcome, we've also been able to talk about the specific nature of sport, both at the participation and the elite level, which says that, you know, this system of partnerships, working in partnerships, cooperation and co-opetition is important for different reasons at both the elite and the participation level of sport. And this is one of the special features of the sport business, which makes it fairly unique as an industry. Okay, so that's the end of the lecture for this week. I will be sending out and talking to you I will be sending out an email and giving you some instructions for the seminar, not for this week, which is week 5, but for week 6. In week 6, I'm going to ask you to do some readings to allow you to think about the relevance and the application of some of the concepts we've discussed today, whether it's kind of price, income, price of other goods, and tastes and preferences from the kind of typical neoclassical approach, or whether it's uncertainty of outcome. I'm going to ask you, excuse me, to read, to conduct some reading to actually enable you to try and apply this to the organisation that you're thinking of looking at for your assignment for this module. So in the seminars this week, we're going to take a similar approach to the seminars for week 4, which was around demand for leisure time. We're going to have a general discussion around some of these issues. And then in week 6, we're going to pick this up again, and we're going to look in more detail at specific aspects, and you're going to complete some reading to help you do this and answer some basic questions in groups. Okay, thank you very much.